Hey there, welcome to episode 161 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. We're recording this at 3:55 p.m. Yipes, that's late. Pacific Daylight Time here in Greater Vegas. On Friday, March 27, 2026. We normally publish on Friday, sometimes in the morning, but we might make it for the Friday part. Friday, March 27, 2026. Today's title and topic, including failure. Unlike batteries, failure is always included, right? No, sometimes not. And that's what we're going to talk about today. If you're not familiar with the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program, the Cafe Genius part of it is an homage to two different things. Cafe with two F's, an homage to the Cafe Centro, where startups start, a small coffee shop formerly located in San Francisco in the South Park, very near the what is today the Oracle Ballpark, and they did not make it all the way through the pandemic apparently. So they made it a little bit, but I think it was about 2 years ago they had to shut down. So Cafe G, I had been there several times. It was a cool place with two F's. They had an accent over the E. We are keeping it simple, differentiating. So an homage to that, where startups start. I've often said that the Greater Vegas area really does need a few Cafe Centro spots. And Genius, as in the Genius Lunch, which used to take place on an ad hoc basis back in the downtown project days, where people that were pursuing their entrepreneurial endeavors would get together every once in a while. If you were around, if you were not a big deal. Usually call it a dozen people. Some people knew each other already. Some people, quick intro. What are you working on? It's basically a way to connect with human beings if you were super busy all the time. Get a little gossip, share what you're working on, a couple of references maybe. It was kind of a very loose version, kind of unscheduled version of the Bootstrappers Breakfast, which I was running here in the Greater Vegas area for a time, for like 2 years. So I think it was more effective. The Genius Lunch was a much more effective thing. And maybe someday we'll bring it back. My first attempts didn't go very well. Not a lot of attention. I think more people have to kind of get it, and there wasn't a lot of getting it. So Cafe Genius combines those two, initially conceived to drive the pitch workout room, which we kicked off in January of 2022. And then a few other things have come along, and now we're always looking at the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem and how it's working, what goes on, what could be done better, what we need to analyze, how we might evaluate it. And everything is from the bottom up, bottom in the most generous way, from the ground up, if you like, the people actually doing it, the people actually depending on resources and availability and maybe even some cooperation, maybe telling the whole story now and then. And then impresarios, well, that's those people. Impresarios are the people making it happen, doing it, aspirational, nascent, successful, maybe not successful, exited, people that are pursuing their entrepreneurial and or innovative ideas, adventures here in the Greater Vegas area or maybe elsewhere. Sometimes what we know here can be applied elsewhere and vice versa, so that's always good. And that is the Cafe Genius Impresarios story. Do we have guests? We haven't in a long time. We should get back into having guests. There's a couple of pieces I need to put together first, and then maybe we'll try to reach out to people again and light those fires once more. In the meantime, the weather has been very strange for me. We have our heat wave, humidity, somewhat. It's having an effect on my speaking voice, so I'll apologize now if it's a little bit scratchy, but I'm still here. Hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, including a brief summary. It's actually a little bit not brief, but 2 sentences. The summary is never going to be like 10 pages or anything. It's always 1 or 2 sentences, but I try to make a big thing of it for some reason. The links, we have 2 of the normal Cafe Genius links, the homepage and the profile page linking everything. And then we have three episode links for you to consider. And before I forget, I need to get this one link is a YouTube video link, but I didn't put the whole title. The title is kind of long. So when we get to that, I'll read the title, but it's, I have the channel name, Barry's Economics, which is actually kind of interesting. So let's get started so we can get on with the weekend. The summary of today's episode: there is usually a severe bias towards success, discussing success, and emulating success, especially when people speak of economic development, so-called community building, and so on. Does anything ever not go to plan? So we should include failure, right? Hence the title. The links, as usual, the Cafe Genius homepage, CAFFEGENIUS, Cafe Genius. I don't know what you get if you type it with one F. I've honestly not looked. I think somebody did have that a while ago, but I don't know. cafegenius.org. I will simply say that one of these days. No, I was thinking about it yesterday. I'm like, I really should just bite the bullet and not sleep until I get this done. This is a good weekend for a little website hackathon. So maybe I'll see if I can get everything all sorted out. The host profile page linking everything. If we ever do have guests, there would be a similar sort of a reference link, like here, go here to find all my stuff. Maybe a Patreon page or something. So my host profile page linking everything. buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. I registered that page or that profile, I guess, in March of 2023. 23? No, 21. 21, sorry. 21. 23 is the number of years I've been on LinkedIn. 21 is, LinkedIn is horrible. But 2021, 2023 is not a year that I'm concerned with. 2021, I signed up for buymeacoffee.com with my username, DanHugo, DANHUGO, and also with Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo. So it's been 5 years. And at the end of this month, I will not be able to say it'll now be 5 years and 1 month. So it'll be over 5 years. So 5 years ago, registered that. buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo, freeform profile. So I just have links to everything, all my audio programs, projects, some biographical information, some affiliate links, and you don't need to spend any money in any way. If you do visit that page, you are more than welcome to. You can click on those affiliate links if you like. They're things I actually use. And don't forget that the Buy Me an Update audio program does, and hence the name, is published first at buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo/posts. And then usually 2 hours later, I have it automatically post to the other usual places, the podcast spots. Ko-fi.com gets published whenever. All of that is linked at buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. Can't go wrong. The Barry's Economics video, it's a YouTube link. I have linked there. And the title is, wait, did I just get email? So I did. Sorry. The title of this one. And I have to say that it was a recommended video on YouTube. And when I saw it, the cover image, I don't know if the thumbnail looks exactly like this, but the single image when you first load up the video is sort of jarring. Like, what is this? What's going on here? It's the Diary of a CEO. The title, Diary of a CEO, is making you less successful. And the image it's I cannot remember his name. Stephen Bartlett. Yeah. Stephen Bartlett. I watch his show for whoever the guest is, but I can't say I'm a fan of Stephen Bartlett. But anyway, his name is right there too. You'll see. But the Barry's Economics guy is in the other half of the frame, and it's got a little purple background, orange text. It wants you to fail. And that's sort of eye-catching. So when I saw that, I was like, you know what? I haven't really talked about, I've seen it and I know it. And I've been talking about this forever, that we really should have, instead of pitches, a lot of people do pitches here in Vegas. Why are we not talking about some failure stories so that people can learn from it? So that's what we're going to talk about today again, but slightly differently. So Barry's Economics. Check out the video. It's actually really interesting. You don't have to watch all of his videos, but just that one is very interesting. What he talks about is called survivorship bias. So I have a link to the Wikipedia page. I've linked to this before, at least once or twice. And if you are not familiar, maybe I can jar your memory. Usually it's displayed or illustrated with and it's in the Wikipedia article, there's a image, and I believe it was created. This image was created by somebody at Wiki Commons or something. So I don't think it was actually the original material from World War II. But during World War II, I don't know if it was in England or in on the east coast of the U.S. somewhere. Probably in England, but read the article, read the Wikipedia page. There were people sitting in a room looking at a chart of some sort, an illustration. They said, we examined and inspected all the planes that come back, and we see here are where all the bullet holes are. So you'll see an airplane silhouette with red bullets, red dots representing the bullet holes. So we need to know where to up armor the aircraft to make the missions more reliable and whatnot. And person in the back, and I think it was Abraham or something. He becomes a little bit better known later, probably based on some of this discussion here. But he raises his hand and says, we should put the armor where there's no bullet holes at the engines and the cockpit. And this seems obvious now. But they said, what do you mean? And he said, because those planes aren't coming back. The surviving planes have bullet holes on the wings and the fuselage. The planes that don't come back have the bullet holes at the engines and the cockpit. So the survivorship bias is that we're only looking at data from the survivors. We're only looking at some of the data. This is really important. This is it can be critical, but it's super important. So and that's essentially what Barry's economics video is about. But he goes into some examples and so on and clips from the show and whatnot. And it's important to see how this works out because I'm always reminded, and of course, it's always easy to look back also, right? So I'm going to tell you, here's something you may have heard before. I don't need to go to college. Look at Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg. They dropped out of college. Yes, well, you're taking two examples after the fact and then looking into the past. If you take the population of all people who have dropped out of college, a significantly small fraction of them are Bill Gates and or Mark Zuckerberg, for examples. So it's really important to know what your biases are. There's probably some motivated reasoning in there as well. Like, let me find a rich person who's found great success who also dropped out of college so I can use that as an example, right? So you can see the same thing if you're going to say, oh, this is a really good area for startups. Let me show you the successful startups. Okay. Where are the startups that didn't make it? Oh, we don't have any of those. Sorry. And I have a link to it's a Wikipedia article about learning by teaching. In other words, you could probably learn a little bit more about your failure when you tell someone else about it. And that's been proven, that's been shown that it actually is effective to actually sort of solidify or through re-examination. The art of explaining something usually means you have to examine it so you can explain the subtleties and the nuances and whatnot. So that is actually valuable. So there is something in it for the person telling the story other than lamenting their own failures. Surely we've all had one or two, right? So first things first. Let me pause for a second. All right, I got some water. First things first. I have mentioned before, more than once in fact, that pointing out failure, and that's a term I'm using as a generic, not as a judgment. So like failing is a piece of metal can fail if it snaps, right? If you pull on it or you paperclip, if you bend it back and forth too many times, it just breaks. That's called failure, right? So it's not necessarily a judgment about someone. It's the things are very different now, not as we hoped, right? So it's not intended to be malicious or anything like this. So pointing out failure is a way to teach and learn about what to do next, usually for those actively pursuing their entrepreneurial and or innovation efforts. But this actually applies to pretty much anything, including paperclips, whether a solo effort or to complete chores at home. How come I didn't finish the chores? Spent too much time on my phone between this and that. Learning to ride a bicycle, pursuing a startup with co-founders, everything. Failing is learning. That's how it works. So yeah, we should probably do it more often, examine those things. Should I touch this hot plate? Oh, should I touch it again? Nope. That's the voice of experience. But again, talking about failing is also a form of learning, because who does not learn from retelling of a learning experience? As the saying goes, if you want to really learn something, explain it to someone else. Maybe you have heard of the Feynman technique, And that's, I don't know if the Feynman technique is mentioned in that Wikipedia article, but that's similar. It's one version of learning from teaching. And there are a few other variants, but the take home, you will gain something from helping others explain what you learned when things did not go as you may have hoped. So the value proposition is not difficult. It's pretty straightforward. You can talk about your successes all day. What are you going to learn? Hey, I was right. Yay. And to be honest, and this is something that also the Barry's economics video points out, you were right, but you were also almost certainly extremely lucky. And it's hard to take an example that doesn't highlight that. Like, oh, I should just be able to drop out of school and be the next Bill Gates. He kind of got lucky. He kind of got really lucky. And a lot of other things were in his favor. So the whole story, including failure, is worth considering and paying attention to. On the flip side, if I'm pondering my own adventures, possibly somewhere in the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem of maybe the greater Vegas area, my aspirations may be powered entirely by optimism. And so it is a wise move to listen to the stories of others who have gone before me, so to speak. While it may seem useful, even exciting, to mill around on a Saturday listening to cheerleading and enjoying victuals gratis, the really, really useful stuff will come from someone who learned the hard way, so to speak, and is then willing to share their tales of woe, or is it whoa, so that you can maybe avoid repeating them. There are certain aspects to the so-called startup scene in the greater Vegas area that are worthy of listening to some of the negatives. Some things are not as advertised. And so it's really good to know those up front rather than hanging around all day with, hey, are you in the startup scene? I surely am. I'm here. Checkbox. Right. So people who have been there, done that, and have the stories to tell because it maybe didn't work out. Why didn't it work out? Well, I depended on someone coming through on something and then they turned their back on me, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, you got to be able to Vegas is an extraction economy. Keep that in mind. So survivorship and marketing, and this is another aspect, the marketing side. The YouTube video, if you do watch it, the link in the links, it's pretty good. I do recommend it. I do recommend watching it, I should say, but at least flip through the Wikipedia page on survivorship bias, as I mentioned. It is essential, critical even, that we understand our biases when we are trying to understand something with data, which is most of the time, right? We're always getting inputs and we got to figure out what they mean and what we should do with them. Survivorship bias comes from only considering some of the data, where some of the other data might actually be more important, but it might be missing, so that only the survivors are considered. This may be literal, as it was in the World War II up-armoring question. That's the origin story, I suppose, but it could be generally true. Doesn't have to be actual people surviving or airplanes surviving, but it's the stuff that makes it through, the startups that make it to a 5-year or one, whatever the goal is. They pay back their investors. Usually that's the one that counts. Where the origin story was about airplanes and where the YouTube video is about personal success stories and the way that they are biased, let us consider startup ventures of any kind, and it could be a food truck, a bookstore, a tech company, whatever, and whether you are in a good place to kick off the effort. I mean, a good place geographically, but also mentally, financially, in any other way. Is everything go for a liftoff, so to speak? So I think it's really easy to think, I'm going to start a company here where I am right now. And that may or may not be the best. And it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And then whether what you need to accomplish those things is here, right? You have to wonder, why does everybody want to be the next Silicon Valley? What was it about Silicon Valley that made it Silicon Valley? There were a lot of things. The main pillars were all there. There was probably momentum. I'm going to posit that the culture of innovation was essential. Access to capital didn't come until later, right? The culture of innovation was evolving and strengthening and becoming more vital through through some of the early 20th century. Certainly after 1944, when Frederick Terman returned from his radar engineering efforts on the East Coast, and so it kind of snowballed from there. But the access to capital part came later. Silicon Valley was an agricultural center on the coast, right? They had the nice bay, they had nice weather, and they happened to have a population, some part of the population that was really into radio or vacuum tubes and radio communications. And people were curious, and other such things were agriculture, of course. So there was a sort of an innate intellectual curiosity within their culture, which led to that culture of innovation, which is essential. So knowing what's around and where you're starting is important, and knowing what's missing may be more important. So the challenge here, the marketing for a place from your economic development folks, wherever you are or wherever you might go, is rarely going to let you in on the bad news. If you go to any locality intent on drawing in entrepreneurs, focusing on startups, especially AI startup tech ventures of late, you're going to hear about how many successful startups are already blowing up, how many potential employees are milling around waiting to work for you, because access to a talent pool is also important. Access to capital, of course, support from local governments, like maybe grants or incentives or tax breaks. So all these are good, exciting news. I gotta go there. They got the most stuff. There may even be guaranteed sunshine and rainbows. Finding out where the rough spots are is something it might be something you need to find out for yourself. Maybe you will go there and hang out at a place where people will tell you the honest truth. I can tell you that doesn't always. I've watched this happen, where people are so excited and they only want to tell people the good news because I'm excited and you should be excited. Here's all the cool stuff that's available for we someday entrepreneurs. But some people have an actual need to know these things, and honesty and transparency would be nice. So I'm all for it. So how about some practical retrospection? I've definitely talked about this before. I've not turned about it before. I've definitely talked about this before. Whenever a startup community builder, which I will remind you is not a real thing, it's only a job title. So you can't really build community. I did a whole episode about this, community versus ecosystems, last week. Forget about ecosystem building. That's even worse. Whenever a startup community builder wants to talk about a particular locality, there is a strong likelihood they will pull up similar localities elsewhere to compare various properties like population, education, demographics, resources available, existing startups, and small business stats. Don't forget those exits. Got to make money for your investors. And the list goes on and on. There's always are we better? You'll frequently see here in Vegas, we're the third best, or we are the best of this from 4 years ago, etc. So once you can get a trophy, make sure you display it, even if it's not relevant anymore, if it ever was. Perhaps this is before your time, but the downtown project was a thing in downtown Las Vegas a while back, from about 2013 to 2018. And I say that because I was here in 2013 and I kind of watched as it was unfolding. I moved to Vegas in mid-July, but August 1st, say, 2013. And they had a 5-year plan. It was 2018, 19, I think. Things were kind of looking a little weird. Companies had already left, and it was already showing signs of maybe not working out as planned, and so on and so on. So, but figure it was somewhere in that window, with a legal entity called DTP, Downtown Project, still around the last time I looked. So there's still a DTP.com or something, I think. I'm not even going to look because what are they doing? Mostly not really operating as it once was, though. I think it's basically looking after some properties that might still be on the books or something. Who knows? The idea was to form a startup community in the downtown Vegas area. The story of this is vast. You can read Tony Hsieh's book, Delivering Happiness, and you can also read for the plan, and you can read Amy Groth's Kingdom of Happiness, which was she, as the author of the book, embedded in the downtown project, talking to people, kind of watching it unfold. Both of those were interesting and sort of interrelated reads. So the idea was to form a startup community in the downtown Vegas area, basically East Fremont, if you're familiar, and a couple of blocks in either direction. So East Fremont basically runs east-west, and then, 2 blocks north, 2 blocks south, a little bit more than that, but figure, you're definitely in the downtown project. If you're at it was the downtown cocktail room, which is no longer around. But if you were there and you either went north or south 2 blocks, you're kind of on one of the boundaries, basically. This is the same footprint as basically East Fremont. And So they started this in that footprint and invited aspirational entrepreneurs to move in and start up, which did happen. So you had a lot of people there. Hey, Tony said I should move here and start a whatever it was. Not focused on tech. So I always give credit for that. They were not overly focused on tech startups. It was much more about the startup notion, not the startup focus, right? It turns out this is the same footprint as the current innovation district, give or take. I'm pretty sure that area is within the innovation district. I don't know that an official map of the innovation district actually exists. That's a different story. With some people able to recall today even what worked and what did not, certainly there is something to be learned from those experiences. Someone really should work on a downtown project retrospective, which you've heard me talk about already. That I wish it was a we, but right now it's just me, and more than one person would make that easier. And I can't even say that I've been working on it lately, although I do have all of my sort of version 0.9 beta questions for a collection of surveys, like broken up into sections so that you don't have to sit there and do tons of stuff. But it covers different aspects and some, optional. I don't want to talk about funding. Okay. So it breaks it into areas where people might want to reflect and retrospect, and some maybe not. So one of these days, someday soon, probably maybe in the next month, I really want to touch on some of the bottom-up infrastructure development, like a centralized introspection and thus retrospective for comparison platform to capture some inputs from the Greater Vegas area at large, rather than focusing on LinkedIn and 200-person survey populations and 300-person startup community populations and so on. Anyway, that's for another time, but soon it's coming. Something I have asserted, the downtown project was better at pitching possibility than supporting the people who were drawn in by it. There are some positive things, definitely some ideas to consider. And again, the lack of complete focus on tech, I think, was definitely noteworthy. It's something that should be re-examined in the modern era. Definitely some ideas to consider reusing with some modernity polish for a so-called startup community downtown. And I will say it again, I'm not fond of the use of community as a catch-all term. People overuse it, but it is what it is. There were certainly some missteps, which may get left off the presentation if you're talking to somebody who is talking about economic development. Now, we did have the downtown project, and I was not a part of downtown project either, so I'm not a we either. But it's usually people presenting the positive aspects, not necessarily delving into some of the negatives. There were certainly some missteps, though, and some of the things that are not mentioned are, in some cases now and then, if you do mention them, you will raise the ire of people who my mouth is going nuts here. You'll raise the ire of some people who take such exploration as attacks on the late Tony Hsieh, who passed away 2020, was it? No, November 2020, I think it was. Somewhere in there. Sorry, I don't remember the exact date, but Tony, so you're attacking the memory of Tony Hsieh. And I will always remind people, no, I'm looking at the downtown project, not any one person, but the culture that was developed in a very short time, and whether that's a real culture or, that's to be debated. But there were certainly some things that worked and some things that did not. And so we should learn from these and not consider those explorations as attacks of any kind. What good would that do? So it's not about blaming or somehow enjoying failure. No, it's actually about the learning process, which I think is could be invaluable, because there is an actual startup community of sorts, for what that is. But this formed in the actual downtown region, which is now part of the so-called innovation district, which means you have same footprint, some same people, similar resources, similar populations. Things have changed, of course, in the last 7 years or so, 7 or 8 years. But you can definitely compare production by street. You can definitely compare what they had tried to accomplish in the downtown project during that time frame and what is happening now, what works, what doesn't. And you'd be comparing apples from the same neighborhood, right? So I don't know. I don't understand why more effort has not gone into that exploration. So we'll have to see. Obviously, this is problematic if the goal is to learn from what worked and what did not, if people are going to be all bent out of shape about it. And again, failure is a learning experience, not an attack, certainly in the context of this. Maybe if your teacher doesn't like you and they fail you because you didn't turn in your homework, that's different. But it's a learning experience, definitely. So what do we have today so far in Greater Vegas? This is my opinion. It's my take. And I do have to say I've been much less involved in the sort of the primary startup scene or startup community or startup whatever. I think there are several things that don't work. Doesn't work for me, definitely. But yeah. So one of these days I will re-explore, but I need to do a couple of those things that I mentioned that we need to get have a discussion about in the next weeks. Get a couple of those things up and running so we can start on, I don't know, the retrospective or something. Anyway, what do we have today? So far in Greater Vegas, there seems to be a drive towards economic diversification. Ding, ding, ding. It's stepped up since around 2018 and now even more so after the pandemic slowdown. So there is a legitimate fear that the strip will be emptied out again by something bad. And that definitely has a negative impact on the economy in general from various directions. Going by what I've seen flying by, I should say, in the LinkedIn newsfeed, which is sadly where this stuff turns up more than in the public news outlets and whatnot. So basically, if you're not using LinkedIn and you're not following the right people, you may never see some of this stuff, which I think is broken. Maybe you'll find some of it at the LVGEA website, maybe the LVCVA website, maybe a mention now and then of the higher profile. If you want to learn about Formula One, that will make the news. If you want to learn about Global Entrepreneurship Week, which is at the same exact time as Formula One, there is not going to be a mention of it anywhere in any news outlet or on the LVGEA. That's Global Economic Alliance. They're a public-private entity that does economic development guidance and so on. You're not going to find any mention of Global Entrepreneurship Week, but you will find Formula One. So it depends on where you're looking and for what. But the odds are you're not going to find the sort of things that we talk about. It looks like the shift is away from over-focus on the startup scene, much more focus on key industries. So fintech, health tech, healthcare, fintech, health care, and exercise tech or something, fitness tech, something like that. There's a couple more, but these are established entities, right? Manufacturing, which I think should be a big one here, and they should definitely roll in some of the experience or some of the clout, some of the reputation that the Vegas, Southern Nevada area has with regard to sustainability, water conservation in particular. So manufacturing can sometimes be resource wasteful during the process. So optimizing that for sustainable construction processes is actually something interesting that might work out here. And then of course there's this goal to have be a global innovation hub and focus on AI. So, we'll see what happens there. I'm always optimistic, except when I'm not. There is still some work there on the startup scene. There's still some work to be done, but there's still some mention, I should say there. Not work. There's still some mention on the LVCVA website. So they do talk a little bit about the entrepreneurial economy, ecosystem, whatever words they use. And the GOED, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, would like there to be startups. And there is the right to start, which I think, I don't know if Nevada has joined that effort. I think maybe there's some sort of intent has been described. Maybe for Vegas or maybe for Reno, I can't remember. But Right to Start is a thing, and the America the Entrepreneurial is a nonprofit entity that I think Nevada is founding. I can't remember now. These are still sort of up in the air to me. They're still new, so we'll see what unfolds from them. But Nevada is figuring into those things at the state level and perhaps at the city level. So yeah, we'll see. Let's see if they're really serious about it. It remains to be seen how these will factor in, though. So yeah, we'll see. The fun economy and drawing in established companies from particular verticals really does appear to be the near-term plan. So fun economy, which does include professional sports and entertainment in those areas. Clearly, as I'm recording this, an NBA expansion team may happen. So that's going to be coming up soon. I think a vote was taken to consider it, from what I understand. I'm not a basketball fan, so I'm repeating what I've heard. The is it going to be the Las Vegas Athletics or the A's? Their stadium is coming along. They're still planning on moving here to have baseball. Of course, we have hockey, and we have the Golden Knights, and we have football with the Raiders. So we got everything covered for professional sports. And that tells me that the fun economy is still most definitely front and center, and rightfully so. If they can figure out how to get tourists to come back and visit, spend some money, I guess that'll help with some of that. February was allegedly, I can't remember the percentage, it was 2.1% or something, some small uptick from February last year. But you have to remember that February last year was down from the February before that. So signs of improvement, but small signs that are hard to read. The LVCVA keeps track of that stuff. We talk about that from time to time, and I'm sure I'll talk about it as we get more data. And again, that data, though, it focuses on the fun economy. So that's not an indicator of any sort of success in the startup industry of any kind or local small businesses or anything like that. In order to get the rest of the story, one must have a halo. That is, you have to be revered by people with money here. Be a part of the relevant agency or organization like LVGA, LVCVA, maybe a chamber, especially the Chamber of Commerce, the Vegas Chamber. Maybe the UNLV Office of Economic Development. There are a few others. So if you're in those groups, you'll get invited to, or maybe you have to pay for a ticket, either way. But you usually have to pay to get the news, get the presentations, to attend a gathering of cool people who are discussing the state of affairs and the direction of the economy in the near term. I would much rather see more of this information flooding out into the general public, especially when we tend to find out about the odd decisions after the fact, rather than anything about economic plans and justifications. Now, I'm not saying they don't share anything, but they don't necessarily share everything. And I think some of the insights that could be shared in these for pay meetups and gatherings would be interesting if it was made available to the public in a place where people would see it. But it's you have to know people. Who are we? Who are we anyway, right? But the example I always give is here in Vegas. If you visit a news website like 8 News Now, or what is the 3LV one, or so, whatever it is. So the TV news sites, for example, they always have a weather bug in the top left corner of the website, or top right, somewhere up there. So you'll always see like cloud or sun and a temperature. Like, why do they not have a water level? That should just always be there. Oh, how's our water supply doing? Right? Like a gas gauge in the car. If you remember those, gasoline used to, anyway, the battery gauge, charge gauge. How about that? So that should just be something that's always available. But the only time you see it is when it's going down too far. Like, time to save water. Like, no, every day is time to save water. Anyway. The important part, though, is transparency so that people can be aware of what's happening, especially when decisions are made, like let's put Formula One through the city, through the strip, and then obstruct foot traffic to some. What could go wrong? Come on. We'll find out when the lawsuits come in, and they did. I would much rather see this information flooding out to the general public. That's the take home, right? More information should be available to more people all the time. Otherwise, I have to be honest, we do not appear to have a coherent plan. I've said this before, or even coherent notion of a plan, ideas of a plan, I guess, from top down or bottom up, that is getting traction within the ecosystem as far as how to put the resources that are available in the ecosystem to good use. Now, I'm not saying completely absent, but yeah, I keep hearing different versions of different things for different startups and whatnot. Certainly no cohesive message or understanding as far as I've seen. Recall that we have an episode about coherence and cohesion in this context. And it was, 3-4 weeks ago, which are, so wherever you found this audio program, just scroll back a couple weeks, which are a plan and a message. So coherent plans and cohesive messaging, respectively. Every time I hear people talking about, Vegas is going to blow up, it's going to be the next Silicon Valley. Well, I don't really hear that as often anymore. But that's not a cohesive message. That's, somebody said this and wrote it on LinkedIn. But the coherent plan to do that was absent completely. I don't know what they were thinking. And I've said as much to city staff people. Like, I don't think you guys know what you're doing to do this whole next Silicon Valley idea. You should give it up. if the downtown project suffered from isolationism as policy, and it really did, and in some cases explicitly, like part of the plan was to not be a part of anything outside of the downtown project. That was told to me by several people. The startup community of Greater Vegas is not doing much better, and the surrounding resources like education and local press and local government may not be helping, and they may feel that they don't have to, or maybe they just don't want to. That must be clear going in, which is more of a failure if you're being honest. And that's the sort of things that people in a startup community should be aware of. What I've found, and I'm reading Brad Feld's book, Startup Communities. It's the second edition, but it's still kind of old. But he waxes poetic about how communities come together, and there's everybody's jumping in and take it. What is it? Giving a hand, lending a hand. There you go. People are sharing and telling and notifying. Like there's just a general sense of team, you could say. I guess that's what a community kind of is. But the people actually took a proactive interest. And here in Vegas, I really don't encounter that as described. But I'm coming from Silicon Valley, which was very much like that. There was still a lot of competition, but there were so many people in of the mindset, I suppose, of startups, of entrepreneurialism, of joining startups or forming startups, that you would definitely kind of, you would find yourself in your crowd eventually, maybe different crowds. So here in Vegas, there's a lot working against that. That's a hill that needs to be climbed. And I think people don't really talk about that so much. It's easier to just say, oh, we have this, and to be honest, and I hate to always pick on Tech Alley, but unfortunately, when you look at like, here's what the greater Vegas area has to offer, the entrepreneurial scene or whatever they call it, Tech Alley and Startup.Vegas has their link up co-work thing. And maybe they have another one, but that's it. That's all anybody ever talks about. I always say, if this is such an explosive desert of opportunity, oasis of opportunity, there you go. Why is it always the same three things? They did the same thing with Hollywood 2.0. Like, oh, we got celebrities like Mark Wahlberg and Dean Cain and some other ones. And you're like, wait a minute. Those are the only two you ever mentioned. Are there other ones? No, yeah, we got Dean Cain and Mark Wahlberg. So I think they run to the favorites. And I would really like to see more transparency about the things that they're claiming versus the things that are actually happening. The Hollywood 2.0 stuff, though, didn't make it after 3 attempts in the state legislature. So that incentive program and the other stuff, and there was a job skills training that was rolled into, I think it was the Senate version. Those just did not make it through. And neither of the bills, the Senate or the Assembly versions, were given anything positive from an independent analysis regarding their economic impact. So, bad planning. But we got Mark Wahlberg and Dean Cain, sort of. Mark Wahlberg's family, and he moved to Florida. And Dean Cain, I don't know if he's an ICE agent or just sitting at home watching TV by now. Video games, maybe. My suggestion: if you didn't watch that YouTube video in the links, I still suggest it. You should use it. You should use it. You should watch it. When we hear only positive stories, tales of success, and especially tales that make it sound so easy, we're lacking the entire notion that things may not work. They may not go to plan. They may not be as we believe they are when we start. And that's one of the take-homes from the video, is that people that describe their success probably have a different starting point than you do. They have different resources, different connections to other people. They have a different amount of luck stored up for their adventures ahead. So, yeah, I think it's really difficult to base certain decisions on stories told from people who aren't disclosing. Like, for example, I told you the person that no, I'm going to tell you shortly. Hang on, don't let me interrupt myself. When we are lacking the entire notion that things may not work, may not go to plan, then we get into trouble. But Bill Gates didn't go to college. The video is about this happening with individuals, but we can expand on that to landscapes within the ecosystem where startup efforts may be in some state from aspiration to something further along. But it's really hard to compare directly. And, there's always more to the story. And there's certainly something to be learned from those who have already written their story and maybe crumpled it up and thrown it away. Ideally, all efforts are bottom up. That is, they should come from real, and this is in that book I'm reading, by the way. The entrepreneur should be making decisions because they are the ones that are going to enjoy the outcomes. If you allow the LVGEA or different city or county offices of economic development to make key decisions that are not of the government infrastructure and legislation and regulation ilk, right? If they start dictating things like, well, yeah, we're going to be all about lithium ion batteries and energy storage. Well, you're leaning heavily into the availability of lithium deposits in the McDermott caldera, but is that what the talent pool and culture really dictate? I don't know about that. That's Washoe County. Sorry. Ideally, the efforts are bottom up, though, driven by entrepreneurs and innovators within the ecosystem, not from on high, waiting for an authority figure up in the Crystal Palace somewhere in the castle to step in and take control is asking for good news to dominate, because they're certainly not going to talk of failure, because part of their KPIs will probably be the number of startups that come to town, because telling a good story matters for those looking in from the outside. For those of us here, me, you, our friends, colleagues, we are better off knowing what is going on for reals, not for marketing, for way reals. Finally, final point. Thanks for hanging on. We have already covered the Talks initiative over at the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. I think I've talked about it here too, but it's basically something to a homegrown version of TED Talks and Ignite. And because really TEDx, at some point you got to say, well, TEDx is just a microphone and a stage and people doing work to put it together. Why follow their rules? You're really just making stage presentations. We could experiment with that a lot in a global innovation hub, right? The best time to talk about failure is soon after it happens, but the second best time could be any time from now on, perhaps. And that initiative might be a starting point. The Talks initiative. Talks are one thing. Meetups, a discussion forum in person, not Reddit. Maybe something like a lecture with questions after. Basically, instead of someone standing up and introducing themselves with their name and how many exits they've had, and that's a true story. How about, well, if you're going to get that person up there, tell us how many failures you've had. Yeah, I had 65 exits. Well, and 130, I don't know if this is true, 138 failures. Okay, so how about actual growth, mentorship, something like an entrepreneur in residence program that would be more appropriate than SCORE, for example. And SCORE is not good for startups. SCORE is good for people who want to operate a small business. And while I often say that entrepreneurialism can take those forms, they're different enough so that SCORE could stick around but not be relied upon for every. There needs to be a different sort of mindset. The entrepreneurs in residence, I think, would be much closer to that for a startup. Two people with a laptop and one laptop between them, and scraping up money, working on an AI, whatever. Right? That's different. And your retired executives in SCORE are not going to know what that means. Some might, but their experiences in a different time and a different type of business, mostly, and more involvement from those of us on the ground than we might find at the SBDC, the Small Business. I think it's Design Center, which is both the SCORE and SBDC are part of the Small Business Administration, SBA. Both SCORE and SBDC are treated as standard bearers in the greater Vegas area. We could start by discussing where they fall and how they might do better for ourselves. And again, we always say, oh, we got SCORE and SBDC. When you actually ask people, and I have my own stories, not so helpful, not really good. You're going to hear the good stories. You're not going to hear the bad stories, and the bad stories are where you can improve things. That's why I'm a software engineer, right? That's why you have a bug database. If you only took good news from people, hey, only tell us what is working, then you're not going to have a good product, right? That's probably the basis for another presentation at some point. There's a reason there's bug databases and not working features databases. Only tell us, what is it from Apollo 13? What do we got in terms of status? How about something, is there anything that's good? Is there anything on the spaceship that's good? Is that what it was? Something like that. Just give me the good news. So that's the story. Next week, there's going to be sort of the second half of this, the other side of the coin for Let's Innovate for Vegas. There is going to be, because we are taking the Smarter Smart City Challenge, which was going to start March 1st, but it turns out getting people to even be aware of it is nearly impossible. And when you ask via LinkedIn, hey, teachers, leave us kids alone, or no, rather, hey, why don't you reach out to your students? Because we're not going to reach out to under 18 folks, but we do want to reach out to parents and teachers and maybe get students involved in making their communities better, making, all this stuff. Not a single indication of interest, and that's a fail. We reached out to local press. Hey, can you help us get the word out? Not a single response, and that's a fail. Two problems, two versions of fail. One, it fails with our attempts to get the word out are failing because we don't have buy-in from these entities. But the entire area of Southern Nevada fails because these are basically roadblocks to any form of engagement, doing something new. If we're going to be a global innovation hub, you have to accept that innovation is not, but can we just do it the same way as before? So I'm disappointed, but not disheartened. So we've deferred and I'm going to go into more of this in the Tuesday episode of Let's Innovate for Vegas. So we really need to not depend on LinkedIn at all, and then have direct outreach to people in Greater Vegas who might be interested in participating, because LinkedIn becomes a gatekeeper of sorts. Only people who see our posts are going to have any notion that this is even happening. So that's a fail. Why not Instagram? And well, we tried it. We had an Instagram account. We had Twitter. We have a Blue Sky account. Yeah, we get nothing. We get zero engagement. None. Well, all you have to do is just keep posting 50 times a day. Well, we don't have time for that. So feeding algorithms is not in our roadmap. So, but we'll talk more about this in that Tuesday episode. So the Smarter Smart City Challenge is facilitated by the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, which I am the managing director of. But ideally, we'll have others that would like to be a part of the planning and the whole process. Just getting someone to respond to an email is essentially impossible. And that is a major failure in Vegas. It's something that it's not just me. I answer emails. I don't know why do people find it so difficult? Anyway, that's where we're going to leave it for today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for putting up with my voice. My voice thanks you. It does not thank me, though. It's giving me the finger right now. That's it, though. But thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week. And don't forget, Let's Innovate for Vegas is published on Tuesdays. It's linked in the buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo profile. And if you're interested in the where we are on the Smarter Smart City Challenge and moving it to January, we're basically either going to kick it off at the very beginning of the year, 2027, or why bother, right? Because people don't want to do it. So we'll see what we can get happening between now and then. And that's all I got for you today. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.